Hey, welcome to another edition of Kyle Meredith with the interview series presented by WFPK at WFPK.org, Consequence of Sound, and the Consequence Podcast Network. Thank you so much for checking out the series. As always, you know the drill. If you like what you see, hit the subscribe button. Put out 3 new interviews every single week, a brand new one every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. It's a great way to keep up with all of your favorite artists. And I am so excited today to be talking with Arlo Parks. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I've become such a big fan, I think, as so much of the world has, of the music that you've been doing over just the last couple of years. I mean, this is kind of still a new story. Do you feel like you've gotten a grasp, control on this yet?
I mean, definitely not. I feel like I'm still a little bit overwhelmed by everything that's happening, but in the best way. I didn't expect any of this to happen, so I'm just kind of enjoying the ride for now, I guess.
I guess that's the best way to do it if you're not expecting it. Well, it has resulted thus far into this amazing record called Collapsed in Sunbeams. And, I want to talk about the music on it. I want to talk about the words in it. The latest single, I thought, is a good place to start because the latest single from this record is called Hope. And that seems to be maybe like the thesis of the album as a listener that I take from it anyway. If that's the case, like, I don't know, did you imagine sort of a theme is the generic term for this, but like a through line from front to back for this record?
I mean, honestly, no. Like, I very much wrote the album on a song by song basis, just based off of like instinct and intuition and however I was feeling that day. But then, upon reflection, having finished those songs, I did realize that idea of hope and finding, light at the end of the tunnel was kind of at the core of it all. So.
Yeah. I'd kind of be interested to hear what the role hope plays in this, because we obviously have all been living the same past few years, even beyond 2020, the way it's been going. And I think hope, in the broad sense, we know what that means, but I think it can mean specific things. What does it mean for you in this instance?
I think for me, it's just that kind of knowledge that things can change for the better. I think that especially in times like these, as you say, being an optimist, is is pretty hard. But I think that it's something that's important to be. It's important to actively be like there is light at the end of the tunnel. Pain either changes or ends. It's a lot of different things for me. And I think, throughout my life, the meaning has changed, but it's always that idea of light. That's what I picture, finding the light in things.
Yeah. When you're writing these, do you feel like you're writing them for an audience, or are you trying to talk yourself into the optimism?
Yeah, I definitely feel like it's almost like I'm talking to myself or maybe talking to a friend. I think that a lot of the choruses in this album are kind of like little mantras that I tell myself. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're, of course, such a great writer. I'm not the first one to tell you that, especially with the lyrics. And I know I guess you come from a poetry background. What come first for you? Was it poetry or was it lyrics?
I was poetry. So I started off writing short stories when I was like 7 or 8. And then that evolved into poetry when I was a little bit older. And then I got to lyrics. So it was always very much writing at the forefront of work.
Yeah. What attracted you to that style?
Um, the style of lyrics, do you mean?
I guess I meant the poetry in itself, because poetry isn't
Oh,
for everyone. I think everyone can appreciate it, but not everyone is attracted to it in that same way.
yeah. I mean, I think, when I learned poetry at school, there was a sense of opacity to it. Like I didn't feel like I could connect to it. And then I found poets who approached poetry in a way that was a lot more free, a lot more experimental, a lot more raw. And I think that the ability for poetry to elicit emotion in so few words is what attracted me to it.
Yeah. And then putting that into song, like I would love to hear about that process, because many people will tell you, as you probably obviously know, poems don't necessarily make lyrics. Lyrics don't always make poems, but you found a way to kind of marry the two. What is that process like? And is there a challenge there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, for me, lyrics are a lot more, there's a lot more structure to it. It's a little bit more of a narrow process because, with a poem, I can ramble on for pages and pages, but in a song, you've got to encapsulate a whole story in a few lines. And so I think for me, I don't know, it happens quite organically. Like I just write a lot of poems and then I'll hear a chord progression or a beat and I'll be like, oh, that reminds me of like the poem that I wrote last night, whatever. And then I just pick out phrases that I like. And just try and beat it into shape in a way. Yeah.
Well, I guess there's we get to see a little bit of that process with what you did with Spotify, because if you follow the stories on Spotify, every single song you say, and here's a poem, I don't know, that inspired the song or that relates to the song or reminds you of the song. Like, are those poems directly part of those songs?
I mean, they're part of longer poems that contained at least one of the phrases that I later used in the songs.
I
Yeah.
got you. That's such an interesting way of, I say again, as a listener, of having a relationship with a song like that, because I mean, my favorite songs are the ones you can dig deeper on, the ones that there's, not like a game per se, but that you can, okay, here's the song, but guess what? There's another door behind that door.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. And then, of course, you'll find these little moments, and there are a few of them on Collapse and Sunbeams, where you reference pop culture. And that's definitely a magnet, because it's something that we all relate to. One of the first times, with Hurt, you bring up Twin Peaks. At first I wonder, like, did anything specifically lead that to getting in the song? Because you're talking about someone else watching it, right?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's all about like whenever I'm referencing something, it's either like an artist that reminds me of that person, or something that I was actually watching at the time, or something that they were watching at the time, because all the characters are people that I know. And a lot of the time I'm writing about myself too, but it's always rooted in reality.
Yeah. With that one specifically, I'll say Twin Peaks, of course, conjures a very specific mood. I mean,
Mm,
dark, weird, off center, great, beautiful, all of these things.
mm.
Do you have moods in mind when you're writing these songs? And I guess specifically with this album, was there a color palette, a mental color palette, or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the colors of nostalgia. I think there are a lot of like pastels, there are a lot of kind of oranges, yellow, reds. I mean, as cheesy as it sounds, a sunset, and the kind of that sense of warmth, and innocence. And there were definitely moods that were carried in specific songs more so than others. Like Portrait 400, to me, that was a sense of euphoria, a sense of coming coming through the other end of something very difficult. But then a song like Caroline was more that explosive sense of loss. And I definitely think about songs very visually.
Yeah, nostalgia is interesting, because nostalgia doesn't necessarily mean memories. Nostalgia is that pull. What is the nostalgia for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's exactly that. The way that I see it is that gravitation to things that exist in the past, and even I was experiencing nostalgia for things that I hadn't even lived, or for conversations that I wish that I'd had, and all that weirdness. So I found it interesting to examine that theme for sure.
Yeah, that's something I've noticed as I got older, that it was almost like a struggle. I don't want to say I'm struggling with it, but it was almost like a struggle, because you don't want to let the past keep pulling you and pulling you. But at the
Mm.
same, because for me, I wanted to of course push forward. But what is your relationship with that? I mean, do you allow yourself just to kind of splash into that water for a while?
I think it's always about balance, right? Like you want to live in a way that you're kind of aware of the past and of the lessons that you've learned and of where you've been, but not living solely in there. But I allow myself to splash a little bit, to process, and yeah, because it's fun sometimes.
Sure. I mean, I say I'm surrounded by it around me. I've got Ren and
Mm,
Stimpy and everything over here. I'm actually over. You can't see it on my screen, but over my computer here is a huge Kid A Radiohead poster.
mm,
And it was so awesome to find out that I guess you're a very big Radiohead fan, and you went on to cover Creep, um, which I think, as a Radiohead fan myself, and knowing others, we know about the complicated relationship of that song and the band, because it was such a hit.
yeah.
Why did you want to cover that one?
I think because although, as you say, it's something that seems quite fraught when it comes to that band, I have always found there to be something extremely beautiful in the lyrics. Like I remember hearing that song for the first time and just being so struck by the simplicity of it. When you were here before, I couldn't look you in the eye. It's like there's something so striking about the way that he delivers the lines, and I wanted to strip it all the way down to a piano because it allowed those lyrics to really breathe and the story to be at the forefront of everything.
Yeah, I've heard that song hundreds, maybe thousands of times in my life. It wasn't until your version that I started thinking about it in a different way for the first time, because it's very easy to center in on the big hook, I'm a creep,
Mm,
etc. When I was listening to your version, I started thinking specifically of that line, "I don't belong here," and it's almost
mm,
a song of imposter syndrome to me suddenly, in the
mm.
way that changes. But I don't know, it sort of fits in with this album, I guess, with what you're talking about. Is that how you heard it as well?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that sense of, especially when you're coming of age, that idea of wanting to be cool, of wanting to fit in, of wanting to just kind of be within the mold, and that idea of sometimes feeling inadequate or sometimes feeling like, you're not enough, and examining those feelings and examining how one moves past those feelings and gets to a place where you feel like you belong in yourself and in the space that you're in. So it's definitely about that journey.
Yeah. Before I knew about you even liking the band, and I was listening to the record, and it was probably when I first heard Eugene. Um, there is, I don't know, it's a guitar or whatever that's very reminiscent of, and I thought, oh, once I found out, that you like the band, I thought, I wonder if I'm just going to take a guess that In Rainbows was kind of your Radiohead awakening.
Oh yeah. Oh, of course. I mean, In Rainbows is definitely my favorite. I think, yeah. I mean, Kid A is kind of a close second, but I think In Rainbows sonically, just everything about it, I absolutely love.
Yeah. But you don't impersonate them. Like, I don't get that sense. Was there a point when you realized, as you were becoming a musician, that you were finding your voice and style?
Um, I guess when I I guess when I first wrote, well, when I wrote Cola, that was a big moment for me. But I still don't feel like I found it. I still feel like I'm kind of, you know, on the journey of getting to my sound. And I don't even know if I ever will. I think that, there were definitely certain things that were in line with my taste. I was like, I love crunchy drums. I like singing in this kind of delicate fashion. I like poetry. I like these melodies. But I don't know if I'll ever kind of feel like I'm not going to grow any further beyond the sound that I found, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm
No.
always moving.
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm glad you brought up the drums, because the drums are so good on this record. I love the sound of it.
Thank
It
you.
does remind me of, there was back in the 90s, there was a jazz rebirth where, all of these, I guess we just called them at the time, alternative musicians were really, hip hop musicians too, were sampling jazz in all the songs. Was that, I mean, was that your part of your vision, what the drums sounded like on this record? And where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, the 90s is definitely a decade that inspired this record a lot. Like when I think about the records that came out during that decade, it's like a lot of the most important records to me. Like everything from, TLC Crazy Sexy Cool to like Either Or by Elliott Smith, like everything everything great was coming out during that period of time. And yeah, I was taking reference from hip hop, I was taking reference from trip hop as well, so from like Portishead and Massive Attack, basically just from everywhere, and just trying many different drum sounds until I got it right.
Yeah, trip hop, I always thought, was the unsung hero of that decade, and I've been so happy that artists are embracing that again, because just what a cool sound. It's not a question.
Very
It's just
cool.
a. I don't have anything to go along with it. Um, there is something that you said before about, the way you write, that I certainly really appreciate, that you make these hyper specific moments universal. Um, it's very easy just for an artist to try to make the universal statement, and it just becomes sort of nothing.
Mm.
Like, what do you, how do you do that yourself, and is that a process of rewriting? I mean, when do you know it's too specific, or is that even a thing?
I feel like it's not even a thing to me. I think that it's something that I almost do unconsciously because, for example, when I wrote Eugene, that was like the most specific song in the world to me. I was like, no one is going to understand what I'm on about. Down to like the dream and amethyst and all this stuff. And it felt like I was speaking about, yeah, just like a very narrow snapshot in time of my life. And then it became this thing that people were saying they felt represented by. So I feel like honestly, really I don't try really hard to kind of, force these platitudes on people and hope that everyone connects to it, because I think that can be kind of empty. I think it's more just about doing it and then hoping that it's universal. And if it's not, then I still enjoyed writing the song.
It's definitely proven to be. I mean, I relate with those specific moments way more than I relate to, with the big swooping things. I'll quickly wrap up in just saying, do you know what comes next? Like, did I read this right? You're multilingual, right? Do you speak French as well?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, do you write music in French? Is that something that you're going to be trying in the future?
Yeah, it's something I definitely want to try. I haven't done it that much yet. I feel like maybe I need to read a little bit more because I'm conversational, but writing lyrics is something that I haven't explored yet, but I want to.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, like how easy, not the actual translation, but how easy it is to translate the way you write poetically
Mm,
within French or something like that,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'll have to give it a go for sure.
Yeah. As far as the rest of the year, I mean, I know touring, maybe everybody's maybe or whatever, but do you know what the rest of the year looks like for you right now?
Yeah, I mean, there are definitely, there's dates set up in the US, and in Europe, and the UK as well, and some festivals, hopefully, in August, September, in the UK and in Europe. But as you say, it's all a question, it's a waiting game, right?
Yeah.
I know that I'll be able to like do it eventually at some point in my life, which is fine by me. But fingers crossed it's soon.
Just that timing of everything because you were just getting started. I mean, the first shows had happened just the year before, something like this. Here comes, and then
Mm, yeah, exactly, exactly.
well, at least you put out some amazing music. I cannot compliment you enough on Collapsed in Sunbeams. Arlo Parks, thank you so much for taking the time to talk about it today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, take care, and I can't wait till we can catch the live show. We'll see you around.
Yeah, man. Fingers crossed. All right.
All right,
Bye
bye.
bye.